Greetings to all, and welcome to the Jamaica Diaspora Show. My name is Mark Millward of the West Indian Social Club of Hartford, and I'm your host. The Jamaica Diaspora Show is aimed at providing viewers with coverage of diaspora news and activities in a variety of areas, including business, arts, health, education, entertainment, politics, immigration, trade, and investment. Our first show featured an exclusive interview with the Most Honorable Andrew P. Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, who talked about the Economic Growth Council and harnessing the power of the diaspora. Tune in for more coverage in the future on the activities of the Economic Growth Council and diaspora engagement. Hartford, Connecticut is the third largest population of Jamaicans in the United States, behind Miami and New York. We intend to provide our viewing audience with global diaspora perspectives and coverage from the US, UK, Canada, Jamaica, and of course the Caribbean. Please join us weekly, Saturdays at 2 p.m. and Sundays at 3 p.m. on Hartford Public Access Television, providing global television network coverage at www.hpatv.org. Welcome to the Jamaica Diaspora Show. My name is Mark Millward, and today my guest is Ms. Joan Pinnock, who is the Jamaica Diaspora Advisory Board member for the Northeast. Welcome, Joan.
Thank you so much for having me here, Mr. Millward.
Ms. Pinnock is also the president of the Jamaican American Bar Association.
Yes.
And tell us more about yourself,
Okay.
Joan.
Well, I am Jamaican. First and foremost, I came to this country back in the 80s, actually as a student to pursue a degree in foreign languages, ironically. And in college, my last year of college, I discovered a class called Law and Justice and ended up taking the class. I loved the law so much, and I ended up going to law school. The rest is history. Since then, I've worked a lot with battered women who've been abused, through the Alternatives to Domestic Violence program in New Jersey, which is where I live. I am the mother of one precious daughter, Danielle, who's married and lives with her husband in Los Angeles. I developed a passion for immigration because I'm an immigrant myself. Basically, when I started college, and from then, when I went into law school, I started looking at the immigration law course, and I realized that this is something that really I felt passionate about and that I can help and assist my own people, Jamaicans and other Caribbean nationals, to assist them in obtaining permanent resident status in the United States. So I've been an immigration lawyer since 1997. I was appointed, I passed the bar in New Jersey and was sworn into the New Jersey bar as well as the federal bar in 1997. I started my practice, my law practice, in that same year. At that time, I was just a solo. I'm still a solo, actually, but it was a small office in Englewood, New Jersey. Now, thank God, the grace of God, I have 3 offices, one in Newark, New Jersey, one in Brooklyn, New York, and I have clients that I see in Connecticut. And so my practice has grown. 99% of what I do is immigration work. I really am an advocate for people who are in a situation where they have no status to live in the United States or they want to obtain citizenship, and especially people who are in deportation, who've been deported, and are facing, removal from the United States. I'm very concerned about that.
Well, now tell me how your role as Jamaica Diaspora Advisory Board member relates to your work in immigration, and talk to us about the your role and responsibilities
Sure.
as a diaspora board
Okay.
rep.
Well, in January 2015, I was appointed as the Jamaica Diaspora representative. A lot of people are probably not understanding what that means. The government of Jamaica decided that there were more Jamaicans, they realized that there were more Jamaicans living outside of Jamaica than on the island itself. So they decided back in 2004 to organize the members of the diaspora. So what they did was they appointed board members. So I believe there are three advisory board members in the United States, and there's one in the West Midwest, Miss Kimon Gooden, who is absolutely lovely and doing a great job there. There's another one, my colleague, Mr. Wayne Golding, in the Florida, the southern region, and myself, Joan Pinnock, who is the advisory board member over the Northeast United States. And what that means is that my role is to liaise with the people in the Northeast diaspora and communicate to the minister over diaspora matters, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ms. Kamina, Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, about the concerns, the needs, and the issues that Jamaicans within my region, the Northeast United States, face. And we talk about solutions and ways in which we can address this. Now, what I did was in my second year, which was actually last year, as the advisory board member, I organized with my team, of course. I have an absolutely amazing committee of Jamaicans who are all across the Northeast, and they represent different regions. So we meet once a month to talk about the issues relating to Jamaicans in their particular region. We organized a conference, and this was held June of last year in Queens, New York, and we had different panels speaking about different issues. So we had a healthcare panel, we have had an education panel. My panel was the immigration and deportation panel, since this has always been dear and true to my heart. So what I did was I basically presented on ways in which Jamaicans and other nationals in the United States could obtain permanent resident status. We had other people presenting on how do we get away from deportation? What are some of the ways that you can avoid deportation? And so through that, I started really thinking about Jamaicans and other nationals in the United States as to how can I, as an immigration attorney and advocate, assist in helping. So basically what happened after the conference was over, we did, the real reason, we did a Trailblazer Award, which is a banquet where we honored Jamaicans within the Northeast who had been just trailblazers, trendsetters. They'd started organizations. We had Mr. Erwin Clare from Team Jamaica Bickle. We had several people who we honored. And our speaker at that event was the ambassador, who came and spoke, ironically, about
Ambassador
Audrey Marks. Yes,
Audrey
Ambassador Audrey Marks, who was she is the current ambassador from Jamaica to the United States. And ironically, her topic at the Trailblazer banquet was the issue of deportation and her concern that there were over 20,000 Jamaicans who were deported from the United States within the last 10 years.
Now, is this the start of, now you have a task force.
Yes.
You want to talk how
Yes.
that evolved as a
So
result?
that's kind of how we got started. That's really what had me starting to think as to what can I do to help. I mean, I've done lots and lots of things in my time as the advisory board member. I organized a citizenship drive just before the elections to get Jamaicans and other nationals to come forward to apply for U.S. citizenship, and also a voter registration. And we had a lot of Jamaicans and other nationalities who registered to vote and actually applied for naturalization. So I've been really thinking during my term as the advisory board member as to what can I do to help my people. Now, this task force, as you mentioned, Mr. Millward, was birthed out of that event. Because when I heard the ambassador speak about the fact that there were so many Jamaicans, I am aware that once a month there is a chartered flight that flies Jamaicans from Oakdale, Louisiana to Kingston every single month, the last Thursday of every month. And it's almost like they anticipate that this flight will either be filled with Jamaicans or, there'll be a number of Jamaicans occupying that flight. So it's chartered on a monthly basis. That is disturbing. the reality that Jamaicans are the highest number of immigrants in the United States who are removed and deported back to Jamaica on a monthly basis just terrifies me. And, you know, and not only that, but the fact that the government has to deal with them coming back, you know, on a monthly basis. And, you know, what happens to their families, their children, you know, it's really, really, you know, a very sad situation. So my desire was to figure out, how can I stop this? What can I do as the advisory board member and also the president of the Jamaican American Bar Association for the last 6 years to stop the rate at which Jamaicans are removed and deported back to Kingston. That was the reason. It was this burning desire in my heart to really just do whatever I could to assist my people. And I just, you know, I came up with this idea that we could do a task force. Well, it's called the Jamaica Diaspora Northeast Immigration and Deportation Prevention Task Force. In addition to that, as everyone knows, we have a president-elect, Mr. Donald Trump, who will actually be sworn in this month. And he promised during the time, and I watched and listened keenly, and I was literally concerned that he would remove, I think he said 11 million people who are in the United States back to their countries of origin. And I know that Jamaicans Forum is part of that group, and it's a large number of us that are in the United States, and he promised that he was going to remove them, deport them back to their countries. And that to me is really, really a very frightening thing. And I think a lot of people have been just concerned about that.
Let me take a pause for a moment, and then when I come back, I want to talk more about the task force that you've established.
Sure.
And also I want to talk about what members you have on your task force.
Sure, okay.
We'll be right back.
So there is no widespread speculation and panic among Jamaican green card holders, both living overseas and here abroad. As you all know, Trump recently signed an executive order, which is pretty much in a nutshell,
and a temporary ban on people coming from some Muslim-majority countries that could include Iran, Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and Yemen.
And with many prayers around the world, which I'm starting to think most of it have come from Jamaica, a federal judge finally blocked Trump immigration order. And of course, being the mumalashi that he is, responded by saying, the opinion of this so-called judge, which essentially takes law enforcement away from our country, is ridiculous and will be overturned. Of course, y'all know the old saying, when America sneezes, Jamaica is sure to catch the cold. So how will this affect Jamaicans, particularly Jamaican green card holders?
First of all, the order is not affecting green card holders moving forward, okay? That's number one.
But despite him saying that, a voice note is now circulating social media stating otherwise.
I come in on a flight 9 night yesterday. I'm gonna say, yo, a bunch of people get picked out of a line, dog, and then green card take from them, dog. I'm gonna direct them back. You see me? Go to one room. You see me?
So what is actually the fact? Well, according to US-based attorney Professor David Rowe, he says that although many green card holders in Jamaica may not necessarily be affected by the US immigration order, they should seek legal advice.
Jamaicans who are green card holders who do not live in the United States need to seek legal advice. I would remind Jamaicans who have green cards who do not reside in the United States that green card holders are subject to U.S. taxation and should file a United States tax return on an annual basis. They are subject to income tax on their worldwide income. If they have not been paying U.S. income taxes and they have not been filing tax returns and they cannot prove residence in the United States, their green cards are in jeopardy and they can be seized upon entry, and they can also be denied entry into the United States where they travel.
So basically, if you have your green card and you sit down on it and you not pay taxes, they're going to scrutinize you when you travel even more. Remember, people, that a green card is basically a document that just shows proof that you are not from the US, you weren't born there, but you were given permission to work in the people in country. However, you are still subjected to taxation. So if you're not pay taxes, what do you think the people are going to do? They're going to take all them things from you. Remember that a green card is not a right, it is a privilege. And privileges, unfortunately, can be taken away. So use that information.
And we're back with Ms. Joan Pinnock, who is the Jamaica Diaspora Advisory Board member for the Northeast. Joan, before we had our break, you were discussing the Diaspora Task Force that you have established for immigration and or deportation prevention. Who are the members of your task force?
Okay, so we have approximately 10 attorneys across. Actually, the initial intent was to have lawyers from the Northeast, but word has been spreading like wildfire. We have attorneys from Florida who've contacted us indicating that they want to participate. So right now we have 10 lawyers total who are part of the task force. We actually have additional task force members who are not attorneys. So Captain Rupert Francis, who actually is the lead on the Jamaica Diaspora, I believe,
Crime and
Prevention, right, task force. I actually consulted with him because I know they'd successfully started one, and I kind of wanted to get a guide. And ironically, criminal convictions are so intricately related to immigration that because of the way the law is set up, that if you're convicted of an offense, you can be deported. So I wanted to kind of get a guide from him. So he actually is one of our advisors on the task force. And we have other lay people who are not actually attorneys, but we have Reverend Andrew Bennett, who's actually on our task force. He's one of the members of our task force. He's a pastor in New Jersey, and he's also, one of our committee members on the Jamaica Diaspora Committee. So we have several people, and what we do is weekly. We started doing this weekly. I think we're probably going to have to spread it out a little bit, where every Monday evening we have a telephonic conversation where we talk about what the goals are for the task force and how can we help Jamaicans within the region to prevent deportation.
Well, the topics is something that I wanted to talk about because you have your initiatives. And can you talk some about that?
Sure. Well, part of the reason, the whole entire idea behind this is to help Jamaicans within the diaspora prevent deportation and to help them come back if they've been wrongfully deported, because several of our nationals have been removed from the United States because they didn't have an attorney, because they had bad advice, because some of them just got tired of being in jail and they signed a document saying, I just want to go home. I don't want to stay in jail. I don't want a defense. I don't want to go before the judge. I just want to go back.
Would your task force benefit them?
Yes, absolutely. Especially if it's a situation where they had derived U.S. citizenship from their parents. Some of them didn't even bother to investigate. Successfully, I will mention, back in 2015, I worked alongside attorney Wayne Golding, who is the advisory board member in the southern region of the United States, and we returned 2 deported Jamaicans. They were siblings, actually, back to the United States as U.S. citizens. We organized a seminar in Jamaica, and tons of Jamaicans who had been removed from the U.S. attended that seminar. And during the time we were presenting and having individual consultations with a lot of these individuals, we discovered that there were a number of them. Now, we were successful in first bringing back 2. Actually, I did 1 in 2010, but we're working on some others. And what happened was those 2 individuals were basically not represented properly when they were in the United States. They were deported from Maryland, and their mother is a U.S. citizen, and she was never married to the father. Nobody investigated to find out whether or not, they had derived citizenship from the mom. Like, I believe at the time when they were deported, the law, which I relied on, was not a decision yet. And so basically we interviewed them, spoke with them, and realized that they were U.S. citizens because they had derived from their mom. So what I did with them was I applied for their U.S. passports in Kingston, and I was successful in getting the passports. Now, once I got the passport, I went back to Jamaica and I brought them back. Didn't want to take a chance that they were going to give me a hard time at the airport. So I physically escorted them back into the country and successfully, thank God, brought them into New York. And so they basically live here now as U.S. citizens with their American passport. In fact, the brother just recently went down, married the mother of his children, and is petitioning now for her as his wife, as a U.S. citizen, and their children. So it has a happy ending.
Yeah.
And so it's a wonderful thing. And this is what I'm saying, why I know that we're going to be able to assist not only Jamaicans in the U.S. who are in a situation, but also in Jamaica.
But you know, I do recall when you brought those individuals back, and that was a great accomplishment that
Yes,
you
thank
were
you.
able to
Thank you.
do that.
Thank you very much.
Can you talk about the current legislation right now?
Sure. Well, unfortunately, President Barack Obama did everything that he could, Mr. Millward, to try to assist immigrants in this country. When he took office, there was nothing in effect that would benefit immigrants in this country. When I say immigrants, I'm talking about undocumented people, people who came into the United States without paperwork, either illegally, through the border, who came in on under someone else's name, and there's several thousands of Jamaicans who fit in that category. There was nothing in effect. And so what he did initially was create a legislation called DACA. It's Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. And what that meant was, it's the DREAM Act, essentially, which was knocked down so many years before. And what he said was, at least if I can't help the adults, I will help the children. So he initiated this DACA to allow kids, because what he was finding was there are several young individuals who went to high school. The No Child Left Behind rule that President Bush initiated allows children, regardless of what their status is in the United States, to go to high school, right up to high school. And when they graduate, they're stuck. There's nothing they can do. They can't go to college because they don't have a work permit. They don't have a Social Security card and any identification because they don't have lawful status. So he recognized that there were a number of children, some of them brilliant children, who really were not being afforded the opportunity to go to college. So what he did was he initiated DACA. So DACA allowed children, as long as you can prove that you were in the U.S. prior to your 16th birthday, you would apply for this beautiful thing, deferred action, which would allow you to get a work authorization card good for 2 years with the possibility of extending it for another 2 years. And then you could get a social, you could get a driver's license or a state ID.
Well, what about the parents?
Well, see, that's the thing. That they were not being considered when Barack Obama initiated DACA first. They were not a consideration because I think he probably realized that he would have had a much easier time with Congress getting this passed because it had to do with children. And people are usually more sympathetic to children. So he passed that. Now, in his second term, he tried. He did everything he could, Mr. Millward. He actually signed legislation called expanded DACA, which would allow people, no matter how old they were, because DACA had a cutoff age. You had to show that you were, I think, 31 in order to be eligible for it. Now, the new legislation...
31 and below?
Yeah, 31 and below. So as long as you can show that you were in the country before your 16th birthday, and at the time when you applied, you were not over 31 years old, you were eligible for the original DACA. Now, the new DACA, the expanded, said, doesn't matter how old you are. If you're 90 years old, as long as you can show that you were here prior to your 16th birthday. That's what it said. A lot of people didn't really come that early, but some did, and some would have benefited. However, in addition to that, he created another thing called DAPA, which is Deferred Action for Parental Accountability. And what that said is any parent, regardless of how you entered the United States, as long as you had a U.S. citizen child or a green card holder or permanent resident child, you were eligible to apply for DAPA. We were, as immigration attorneys, were just thanking God when we saw that, because that is probably 75% of our clientele base, people who we can't help because they didn't come in legal, they don't have status, but they have U.S. citizen children. And we hoped and prayed that this thing would go through. It died in Congress, so they didn't
Did it go to the... Is this the one that went to the Supreme Court?
Yes, it did. Because what happened was the president finally realized that he was not going to get this passed before his term ended, so he signed an executive order, which I'm really grateful that he did that. Unfortunately, it didn't work because he signed the order and there was a lawsuit filed indicating that the signature on that order, that whole process of signing an executive order, was unconstitutional. So this matter went all the way up to the Supreme Court. And because, as you know, Justice Scalia passed recently, this court was split. So we have 4 justices on the court who were in favor of the legislation and 4 justices who were not. So it died. So when it got to the court, we couldn't get, a deciding vote on it. So
And that would have been a remarkable accomplishment had.
oh my God. I mean, I would have been able to help so many millions of Jamaicans in this country and other nationals, if DAPA and DACA were passed, because that's what we were kind of waiting on. And it was so close that we had a date certain, Mr. Millward, as to when we could file applications. We were telling our clients, yes, they said, yes, you're going to be able to do it, and it never happened. So who knows what will happen now?
Well, can you talk about what steps that immediate steps you're going to be taking within your task force?
Okay. Well, the first thing we want to do is to, and I've actually started doing that, identifying the Jamaicans who are locked up, because they're the ones that are most at risk to being removed. So what I did, for instance, I was in the Elizabeth Detention Center a couple of days ago, meeting with a client who I represented in court before the judge, and I asked him, could you please tell the Jamaicans that are here in this Elizabeth Detention Center that my team, the task force, want to come and do some sort of educational, dialogue with the Jamaicans here. So we're scheduling meetings at the different jails. And we're targeting Jamaicans and others. Please don't get upset if we're not doing everyone. We don't have enough lawyers to cover all the nationalities. Right now I have to focus on Jamaicans because we're the highest numbers being removed. Eventually we'll include other Caribbean nationals and then eventually others who are not Caribbean. But right now we have to focus on Jamaicans because we have to cut that number down. So I asked him to do that. Now I go routinely to the Elizabeth Detention Center, the Hudson County Detention Center, and Essex County. We have attorneys who live in all the different states. So what we're doing is we're starting out by going into the jails and meeting with the different Jamaican nationals, talking with them, not to say, well, we need you to hire us, but, we want to talk to you about what to expect if you're placed in deportation. What are some of the things that you might be eligible for? What to do if your case has been denied, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to go in there and start doing that. That's one of the first things we want to do. In addition to that, we're going to be creating a hotline, and that's going to happen this month. So anybody who has a relative, a brother, sister, husband, wife,
Or a question? Or a question?
Right, exactly. Well, it really is for deportation, and this is the thing. I need to make this clear because we don't have the manpower to handle, I came into the country last week, and I want to know if I can get a green card. This is not for that. This task force and this hotline will be for people who've been picked up by Immigration Customs Enforcement, ICE, and they're facing deportation. ICE came into the job and arrested your relative, and they're there. They don't know what to do. They don't have a lawyer. We have attorneys all across the U.S. that are willing and available to do consultations. Initial consultation would automatically be free. Now, what happens after that is between the client and the lawyer. So that's what we want to do. We want to be able to create this hotline where people can feel free to call, and we have the lay people who are part of our task force who will be answering the phone or returning calls so that they can say, okay, where do you live? Okay, so I live in Maryland, or I live in New Jersey, or I live in Connecticut. My brother was just picked up. So.
All right. So what you made reference to President-elect Trump's promise to deport 11 million undocumented immigrants.
Right.
What steps should people be taking if they are undocumented and they have this concern?
Yeah.
What steps should they
I
be
think
taking?
the first thing you need to do is to get an attorney. Because if you don't know what you're eligible for, then you need to seek legal counsel. Because I think a lot of people, I remember the day after, the election, then people were calling my office and they were just terrified because of that threat of deportation. So if you don't know, what to do, then basically what you should do is to seek counsel from an attorney. Find out what, if anything, are you eligible for. What can I do to get legal status in the United States? A lot of people, unfortunately, Mr. Millward, have to get married. because they've come here, they've either overstayed their visa or they didn't have a visa to begin with when they came, and they're here out of status. The only thing that you can do at that point, if you don't have family members who can petition for you, is to marry a U.S. citizen. So, and it has to be a bona fide marriage. It can't be something that's made up for immigration purposes, because it's going to be denied. So basically, they need to go seek counsel with an attorney. Now, one of the other things that we're going to be doing is going out into the churches. So you need to kind of focus, stay in touch with this station, because we'll be announcing when and where we're going to be. Our team will be going to different churches at different time and just presenting. And those are going to be your opportunities to meet with lawyers. You know, we'll have maybe 5 or 6 attorneys, immigration and criminal lawyers, come together to talk about the law and how do we, as practitioners, assist someone who came into the country who, you know, is facing deportation. What did they do?
Now, do you have a website established at this time?
Well, because the task force is so new, we're working on it. And our first meeting since the holidays is actually this coming Monday. So all of that will be in effect, you know, probably within the next few weeks or so. So I'll be happy if you'll have me back to come in and, you know, talk about the website, the Facebook page, and the hotline once everything is officially formed. But we anticipate that probably within the next 2 weeks or so, we'll have all of that up and running, because we have a lot of eager people that are very excited and ready to go back to work.
Well, your role as the Jamaica Diaspora Advisory Board representative for the Northeast has been significant. I've observed your efforts. This task force is a wonderful thing, particularly in light of the concerns that many immigrants have. In fact, over 500,000 immigrants, we don't know what percentage were Jamaicans, were deported last year.
Yeah, just a year.
Now, you know, is there any breakdown?
Well, I mean, if you're saying that Jamaicans, 20,000 Jamaicans were deported within the last 10 years, it's possible that you're saying the number was 500,000.
500,000 immigrants.
Right,
but,
immigrants.
But there's no breakdown.
I would
in
imagine that Jamaicans are probably about maybe 50,000, you know, within that number from across the United States. So the issue of deportation is national. You know, it's not just by state, it's just a national problem. But it's actually international as well, because from what I'm understanding recently, there were over almost 50 Jamaicans who were removed from the United Kingdom back to Kingston, and that for them was a large number. They all came in together at the same time, and the government had to figure out what to do with them, because a lot of them were just sent back. And I remember it was such a major thing happening that people said, you know, they're deporting all these Jamaicans from the UK, you know, all at once, which they don't get as many as the US. So, you know, so it's an international issue. Canada has their list of Jamaicans who are sent back. I don't know what it is. I mean, one of the things that I'm working on, Mr. Millward, is something with Carmita Alvarez, who is a social worker in New York, and we're actually trying to come up with something, which we're actually very close to finishing, just to kind of alert and educate people before they leave Jamaica to come here as to what the pitfalls are, what to avoid, what not to do from a legal standpoint, from a social standpoint. So we're in the process of putting that together, and we want to launch it, you know, before the end of May.
That's it for the Jamaica Diaspora Show. Thank you for joining us, and please stay tuned for more programming from Hartford Public Access Television and the Jamaica Diaspora Show. My name is Mark Millward. Thank you for joining us.